I want to talk in this session about creating a book, specifically a nonfiction book. If you were writing fiction, you'd need to go to a fiction writing conference or get some kind of a fiction coach. But I'm a nonfiction guy, and I want to talk to you about nonfiction, which has a huge history in Christian publishing. The notion of people writing down important messages, important letters. You know, most of the New Testament is a series of letters. It's not all letters. Some of it, the book of Hebrews, for example, is clearly a way to try and write down some of the great stories and some of the theology. But the fact is, once we get past the epistolary period, the period of time in church history where everybody is simply writing letters, then what happens is we start seeing people write about the great truths of the faith. You look at what Augustine wrote. You look at what the church fathers wrote. You look at the sermons of Origen or John Chrysostom. There's a rich tradition in the church of people writing nonfiction to try and help other people grow in the faith. Now, certainly in my lifetime, that's exploded. I mean, you can walk into any bookstore and find a huge list of Christian books on a number of topics. Sometimes they're self-help on, you know, how to have a better marriage or how to be a better parent. Sometimes it's more self-revelatory. It's the notion of how to understand yourself, how to grow spiritually. Sometimes it's very practical, how to use your finances, how to engage in spiritual warfare, how to have a better prayer life. The idea is always education and growth, whereas fiction is generally written for entertainment. Now, there's still the notion of learning a lesson and growing from that, but the best fiction is not agenda fiction. The best fiction is simply trying to entertain us, and then as we see ourselves in the story, we can grow. Nonfiction has a very clear sense, a very clear purpose. It's written to cause us to grow and change, to educate us so we can move on. So I want to offer some ideas about nonfiction if you are interested in doing a book. First of all, don't think of the book as being, I'm going to create this huge document. Think of it like you're doing a series of term papers. You're doing a series of articles. Now there's going to be a thread that runs through it which ties it all together, but sometimes the notion of doing a book will overwhelm you and it'll stop you in your tracks. Think of it in pieces. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give you a couple of ideas for how to do that. And I want to remind you that you don't have to say something which is brand new. You don't have to have super original thoughts. It's great if you do, but the fact is, oftentimes it's not so much brand new as it's saying something a new way. And here's why. When my kids were little, Jim Dobson was a big deal with parents. And we were all reading his books and seeing what he had to say and trying to put it into practice. Now, I have a son in his 30s. I have two daughters in their 30s. They don't care what Jim Dobson has to say. He's a cranky 80-year-old man now. And the fact is, every generation needs its own voices. And so books that were popular 30 years ago tend not to be popular today. It's rare for a book, even a best-selling Christian book, to continue to be popular after 20 years or 25 years. I mean, that's why when you see something like Purpose-Driven Life, which has been out there for 25 years, or the 5 Love Languages, you have to understand and appreciate how rare that is, because most books have a short shelf life. So when you're thinking about creating a book, I want to give you a couple of thoughts. The first one is that you're not just creating a book first, you're creating an outline. So I want you to sit down and outline your thoughts for what the book will be. It's what we call scope and sequence. Scope, what's covered, sequence, what's the order it's covered in. If you can create an outline which has maybe 10% of the book, then you are well on your way. Now, I'm going to tell you something. If you can do that, you'll be far ahead of most people who dream about writing a book but don't know how to get started. Well, the way you get started is you create an outline which offers scope and sequence so that you know what it is you're going to cover. And then you're going to look at that outline and you're going to explode it. That is, you're going to add things in. Once you look at the outline, you say, all right, what do I want to say about this point? What do I want to say about this point? What do I want to say about this point? Then you're going to ask yourself, what stories illustrate each of those points? Because we're a story-based culture. So what's going to happen is you create this outline and then you go back and you start filling it in. You start exploding it, is what we call it, where you say, this point, oh, it's got some subpoints under it which need to explain or which better explain that. This point, it's got some subpoints under it. Then you're going to say, here are stories that illustrate those points. So what happens is that pretty soon you've gone from just having a bare outline to having a big, complete outline. And you've got stories which illustrate your points. So you're well on your way. You're like halfway there to having a book. The other idea, I said I had a couple of ideas to share. The other idea is that that's the point to talk through your book. Now, you may not ever have heard this before, but writers have a way of beating writer's block. You know, writer's block, they'll sit down and the writer is just stuck. I don't know what to say next. But every experienced writer knows you have writer's block, you push away from the typewriter or the computer that you have, you read what is on the page you've already written, and then you start talking about what's going to come next. Because you know in your mind what you want to say. You're just trying to figure out, the words you get blocked up. So if you will talk through your book, suddenly you'll discover you've got all kinds of things to say. You tell the story, it leads to other things other notes you want to make. You tell this story, it leads to another story. By first creating an outline, then exploding it, adding points and stories, then talking through it. What you have at the end is you've got this document you can take, maybe you've recorded it, and then you've been able to step in and explode it, talk through it. Suddenly you have the basics of a book, and that's how you get started writing your book.